democracy. Putin's changes.
Hi, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone. Our topics for tonight are Putin's changes, as reported on by Scott Ritter. Also, the unit, which is, of course, a unit of currency, as reported on by Pepe Escobar. And the legacy of neoliberalism, in elections coming up in 2024. That is a piece by Joe Stieglitz, Nobel Prize-winning economist. So, I have some folks here. Don't see them yet, but my indicator says they're here. So, good evening to you. I'm going to start off with the Scott Ritter piece and do analysis and commentary on that. And the title of it is Meet the New Boss. He's not the same as the old boss. And this is by Scott Ritter on May 10th. Scott's a very entertaining writer, as well as someone who appears on multiple shows and been giving his opinions when it comes to foreign policy, Russia, Israel, war in Ukraine. There's a picture of Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. And you see he's smiling. He seems there to have a gentle, paternal smile. He was delivering his 5th inaugural address on May 7th, 2024. He was sworn in for his 5th term as Russia's president. Mainstream Western Russian experts, quote unquote, paint Putin as a corrupt autocrat governing over a failed system and nation. Their, quote, reality, unquote, couldn't be further from the truth, says Scott. In her July 27th, 2020 review of Catherine Belton's book, Putin's People, in The Atlantic, by Anne Applebaum, concluded that following his election as Russia's president in the spring of 2018, Vladimir Putin and his cronies had, quote, once again created a calcified, authoritarian political system in Russia, unquote, including, quote, a corrupt economy that discourages innovation and entrepreneurship, unquote. Years of Putin presidential leadership, Applebaum noted, had left Russia destitute, quote, instead of experiencing the prosperity and political dynamism that still seemed possible in the 90s, the Pulitzer Prize-winning author declared, quote, Russia is once again impoverished and apathetic, but, she concluded, quote, Putin and his people are thriving, and that was the most important goal all along. Applebaum is a much sought-after speaker on post-Cold War Russia, where she specializes in picking apart Russia's Soviet past while lamenting the rise to power of Vladimir Putin, who she characterizes as an autocrat at the end of the decade of the 1990s. In Applebaum's defense, she is not alone in this regard. Indeed, she finds herself in the company of former ambassadors Michael McFaul, national security experts, he should put that in quotes, Fiona Hill and Angela Stent, and intelligence officers Andrea Kendall Taylor, Steve Hall, and John Cipher, all of whom have used their Russia-laden resumes to insinuate themselves into what passes for a national dialogue in the mainstream media over the true nature of Russia and its leadership and what that means for the United States and its European allies. There's a picture of Anne Applebaum. Without exception, the cast of characters assembled above have echoed Applebaum's summation of Putin's legacy and future as a Russian leader. There is one important difference, however. While Applebaum has been an observer of Russian events, the others were all players in the game, active participants in the formulation and implementation of American policy regarding Russia in the period immediately following the collapse of the Soviet Union. They helped to propagate policies designed to exploit Russian political, economic, and security weaknesses to the sole benefit of the United States. And when Putin's unexpected assimilation to the Russian presidency threatened to undo all that they had accomplished during the decade of ruinous governance under Boris Yeltsin, these same actors actively worked to undermine Russia in hopes of bringing Putin down. Any analyst who speaks of the catastrophic decade of the 1990s in terms of, quote, prosperity and political dynamism, unquote, cannot be described as a Russian, quote, expert, unquote, but rather an anti-Russian propagandist. The same must be said of anyone who compares the social and economic condition of Russia circa 1999 with Russia in 2020 and opts to describe the present condition in terms of apathetic improvement. I'm sorry, apathetic impoverishment. I got that one wrong. The fact that Applebaum and company articulate Russia's current economic situation as corrupt and lacking in innovation and entrepreneurship might explain why they have all gotten it 100% wrong when advocating the imposition of harsh economic sanctions against Russia in the aftermath of the Russian invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, believing that the Russian economy would collapse only to witness its survival, revival, and explosive expansion. There are two words that describe the Russian economic environment today: innovation and entrepreneurship. The fact that these words are not in the lexicon of these erstwhile, quote, experts, unquote, oh, there is the quotation around the experts, when describing the Russian economic reality today speaks volumes about the ignorance of this collective. Applebaum and her ilk understand the roots of Russian political corruption and calcification all too well. They purpose-built this system under the leadership of former President Boris Yeltsin and married it to an economic scheme that saw pensioners robbed while robber barons thrived. The Russian oligarch class was midwifed by the present-day Russian experts, quote-unquote, who explain Russia to an American audience infected with the disease of Russophobia. These experts help vector into the mainstream. The marriage of Russian oligarchs to Russian political power was part and parcel of an overarching U.S.-driven scheme designed to destroy, not revive, the Russian nation. It was the living embodiment of societal calcification, and when Vladimir Putin's rise to power threatened to unravel their grand plan, these experts turned on him, projecting their sins onto the new president in classic Orwellian fashion, flipping the script so that up was down, left was right, and right was wrong. There's a picture of Mikhail Khodorkovsky, who's characterized here as a corrupt Russian oligarch. The Applebaum class of erstwhile Russian experts, quote unquote, cannot ever tell the truth about Russia, because to do so would require them to honestly reflect on their own wrongdoing when it came to destroying Russia to begin with and seeking to keep it destroyed in the decades to follow. They've built careers and fashioned sinecures based on these lies, and their very existence depends on their ability to sustain the telling of these lies to the American public. The Russia that Vladimir Putin inherited from Boris Yeltsin was a fundamentally broken nation. The oligarch class insinuated itself into the very fabric of Russian economic and political society, and the Russian people had lost faith with their own history and culture, instead seeking Western-style fortune that required them to debase themselves on the altar of assumed Western cultural superiority. A nation that far removed from its true nature is nearly impossible to govern. No politician could survive the shock therapy required to reverse course. Putin had to prioritize those parts of Russia that needed fixing first, forcing him to hold his nose at the rot that had to be left for the time being, since it provided the framework that kept what passed for Russia together. Over the years, Putin was able to chip away at the corruption of the oligarch class, repairing the damage done by the decades of neglect and slowly encouraging the healing process necessary to revive the Russian nation and the Russian people. But the residual taint of the Yeltsin years still attached itself to the Russian body, the infection running too deep to be purged without undoing much of the accomplishments that had been achieved regarding societal rejuvenation. The West's response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, however, gave Putin an unexpected boost in this regard. First, hundreds of thousands of political opponents, the followers of Alexei Navalny, fled the country. Second, the West sanctioned the oligarch class, crippling them financially and weakening them in terms of the influence they could exert back in Russia. Thank you, West. And finally, the West pushed for the near total divorce with Russia economically, and in doing so, pulled the plug on a politically powerful class of Russian businessmen who had become inextricably intertwined with the Western business elite. In short, the Western response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, influenced by Anne Applebaum and her ilk, backfired dramatically. Not only did Western sanctions destroy the political viability of the Russian oligarch class and business elites, but it boomeranged back on the West in a classic blowback that has crippled the European economy. Vladimir Putin was able to use the need to boost the Russian defense economy to pursue the kind of information entrepreneurship Applebaum et al. Claimed was non-existent in Russia today. The war with Ukraine and the collective West accomplished something else as well. It awakened a dormant sense of patriotism among the Russian people. This patriotic revival has led to Russians falling in love with Russia, rediscovering their culture, their history, their religion, and their values. But Vladimir Putin has been the driving force for the Russian renewal, building upon this new sense of national pride to redefine Russia's role on the international stage as a great nation with a unique culture that is capable of self-sustainment and as such never again dependent on the West for anything. This new Russia can stand on its own 2 feet and protect itself from any enemy that might present itself. The fly in the ointment of this current reality, however, is the degree to which Russia has become dependent upon the leadership of Vladimir Putin. Putin won election by securing 88% of the vote with a 77% turnout among eligible voters. This is a mandate for the kind of change that Putin previously could not consider for fear of tearing apart the fabric of Russian civil and economic society. With the oligarch class and the pro-Western economic elites being effectively neutered by sanctions, Putin can enact sweeping economic reforms designed to reinvigorate the Russian economy based upon the massive reinvestment of resources which had earlier been taken out, of Russia. Here are some Russian soldiers in the special military operation. The war with Ukraine has freed up Putin in another, perhaps even more important way. The residual rot of the Yeltsin years in the form of regional politicians who were more concerned about their individual wealth than they were about the Russian collective still existed, and in their numbers was still a formidable power. By turning the war with Ukraine away from being a war between two brotherly Slavic peoples, which many Russians opposed, into an existential struggle for survival with the collective West, Putin has tapped into a pool of patriotism, the likes of which has not been seen since the Second World War. Russian patriotism is now directly linked to support of and service in the special military operation. Vladimir Putin has drawn upon this new patriotism and the mandate provided by his electoral victory to redefine the modern Russian political class, and by doing so, putting in motion the kind of structural changes necessary for Russia to continue to grow and thrive in a post-Putin era. Excuse me a second. Quote, "It is often said here," President Putin stated in his inaugural address, quote again, "that the head of state in Russia answers and will always answer for everything." This is still the case. But today, unquote, Putin noted, quote again, "Although I have a deep awareness of my own personal responsibility, I nevertheless want to emphasize that Russia's success and prosperity cannot and should not depend on one single person or one political party or political force alone." Excuse me. We need a broad base for developing democracy in our country and for continuing the transformation we have begun. "It is my conviction," unquote, he continued, quote again, "that a mature civil society is the best guarantee that this development will continue. Only free people in a free country can be genuinely successful. This is the foundation for both economic growth and political stability in Russia. We will do all we can to ensure that everyone here can realize their talents and abilities, to ensure that a genuine multi-party system develops, and that personal freedoms are strengthened." In this statement, and this is my comment, but Putin sounds like people that have been his worst enemies, over a period of time. For example, George Soros, who has been a bitter enemy, of Putin, and who has tried to establish democracies, in Eastern Europe, that were based on transformations, of civil society, and that were to have essentially multi-party systems full of innovation, and entrepreneurship, these fail to develop in some of these nations, of Eastern Europe. But here's the president of Russia talking democratic ideology, at least in this particular paragraph. Going on, the quote, calcified authoritarian political system, unquote, that Anne Applebaum decried is but a figment of her imagination and that of those who, like her, have come to hate anything and everything affiliated with the Russia that Vladimir Putin has rebuilt from the ruins of the Yeltsin decade. She and her fellow experts have gotten it wrong on Russia and its leadership and will continue to do so going forward. Hopefully, those in positions of responsibility will understand the price that has been paid for giving credence to such warped analysis. Start listening to the assessments of those who seek to understand the reality of Russia as it is, and not the fiction perpetrated by those who are locked in the failed policies of the past. Only in this way can the disease of Russophobia that has gripped the psyche of the American public be overcome. And when that time comes, and it will come, we can all recognize the reality of what Vladimir Putin has already accomplished and appreciate that which he is currently embarked on accomplishing. Meet the new boss. He's not the same, as the old boss. After Scott wrote this, there was a video by Pepe Escobar talking about some of the specific changes that Putin had made, and another video, by Alexander Mercouris, going into detail about some of the changes that Putin had made. They were key changes in key places, and they indicated Putin's very deep understanding of the people he relies on to govern, and his very deep understanding of the need for new people as well. But now I want to leave this particular topic and I want to do something I forgot to do earlier. I'm always forgetting to do things like this. I really badly need a producer for this show. Since I normally do my own stuff, but if you will grant me a little time for my computer to cooperate, I will be able to share this on Facebook. No, my computer doesn't want to cooperate. Let me see if there's something wrong with my connection, which, however, has not easily shown up. Okay, forget that for the moment. And I'm going to look at our comments for a while. Kay says, hi, Joe. And Greg Mallard says, howdy, Doc. Howdy, Greg. Andy Kenny says, hi, Joe. Listening on in the background, just very busy trying to catch up with chores. Great to see you. Hi, Bonnie. Kay says, hi, Andy, and hi, Bonnie. And Dolores says, hello, everyone. And Lisa says, hi, Joe and Bonnie. Hi, Kay, and hello to you too, Andy. Hi, Lisa. Wonderful to see you here. I hope we can connect a little bit later, just for a few minutes. I want to find out how you're doing. And Kay says, hi, Lisa. And I'm going to go check on my Facebook and see if it's still misbehaving. If it is, I'll just abandon the whole thing from scratch and move on with the show. It looks like no. Facebook has not started to cooperate. Might be Facebook, not my computer. Anyway, I'm going to share a very good post by Pepe Escobar. Okay, at this point. This post is about progress towards the de-dollarization that the BRICs nations so highly value. It's called De-Dollarization Bombshell, the coming of BRICS Plus and the decentralized monetary ecosystem. This was written yesterday on May 13th, 2024. It originally appeared at the Strategic Culture Foundation, but as I've explained a number of times before, if I were to take it from there, share it from there, from the foundation, then Facebook would not run the video. So we have to go to unz.com and to Pepe's columns there to actually see this column. This is a terrific column, though. Get ready for what may well be the geoeconomic bombshell of 2024, the coming of a decentralized monetary ecosystem. Welcome to the unit, a concept that has already been discussed by the Financial Services and Investments Working Group, set up by the BRICS Plus Business Council, and has a serious shot at becoming official BRICS Plus policy as early as in 2025. According to Alexei Sabotin, founder of Archangelsk Capital Management and one of the unit's conceptualizers, this is a new problem-solving system that addresses the key geoeconomic issue of these troubled times, a global crisis of trust. He knows all about it firsthand, a seasoned financial professional with experience in investment banking, asset management, and corporate matters. Sabotin leads the UNIT project under the auspices of IRIAS, an international intergovernmental organization set up in 1976 in accordance with the UN Statute. The global majority has had enough of the centrally controlled monetary framework put in place 80 years ago in Bretton Woods and its endemic flaws. Chronic deficits fueling irresponsible military spending, speculative bubbles, politically motivated sanctions and secondary sanctions, also abuse of settlement and payment infrastructure, protectionism, and the lack of fair arbitration. Contrast, the unit proposes a reliable, quick, and economically efficient solution for cross-border payments. The transactional unit is a game changer as a new form of international currency that can be issued in a decentralized way and then recognized and regulated at the national level. The unit offers a unique solution for bottlenecks in global financial infrastructure. It is eligible for traditional banking operations as well as for the newest forms of digital banking. The unit can also help to upend unfair pricing and commodity trading by means of setting up a new, fair, and efficient Eurasian mercantile exchange where trading and settlement can be done in a new currency, bridging trade flows and capital, thus paving the way to the development of new financial products for foreign direct investment, also known as FDI. I guess the Eurasian Mercantile Exchange will be known as the EME, right? The strength of the unit, conceptually, is to remove direct dependency on the currency of other nations and to offer, especially to the global majority, a new form of apolitical money with huge potential for anchoring fair trade and investments. It is indeed a new concept in terms of an international currency, anchored in gold, 40%, and BRICs plus currencies, 60%. It is neither crypto nor stable coin, as it's shown here. I don't know where here is. I'm going to briefly click on that. There's a website on the unit ecosystem where we can learn much more about it. Maybe we can't learn much more about it. There is a white paper. Oh, yeah, there's much deeper stuff here. So I'm going to have to come back at a later time and cover that. For now, I'm just going to be content with going over Pepe's summary here. This is at theunitfoundation.org. I'm going to put this in my links. And I'm also going to put it in the chat room here so you have access to it. So there it is. So you can check it out in more detail for yourself. Okay, the link to Pepe's stuff is already in the YouTube description, so you have access to that. So, okay, I do want to remark my concern as someone who is firmly in favor of fiat currencies for all kinds, of reasons. I feel that if the unit is based on, is anchored in gold for 40% and BRICs plus currencies for 60%, that it will be constrained. The amount of currency available will have to be constrained, by the amount of gold available. When the gold standard actually prevailed, among countries, there were periodic depressions and recessions that were caused by shortages in gold, in part. And I'm not sure that a new currency that's anchored in gold for 40% of its value and BRICs plus currencies for 60%, I'm not sure that's not going to have the same problems, that gold had. if I were constructing the international currency, I would have it all based on BRICs plus currencies, 100%. But that's my notion off the top of my head. I haven't thought this through. So that criticism I've given you at this point is little more than a speculation on my part. I want to be fair about this. The beauty of going fractal, of course, I always want to be fair about things. That's one of my things. But anyway, the global majority will instantly grasp the primary purpose of the unit, to harmonize trade and financial flows by keeping them outside of political pressure or rules, quote unquote. It can be twisted at will. And of course, everybody understands the reason why that goal is here. It's because of what the U.S. has been doing in the rules-based order. The inevitable consequence translates as financial sovereignty. What matters in the whole process are independent monetary policies focused, on economic growth. I'm not sure about that sentence. I really wonder about it. I understand and generally work with the concept, of monetary sovereignty. I'm not and I know how to define that and have defined it on numerous occasions here. But I don't really see a definition of financial sovereignty here. And I don't know what Pepe actually means as financial sovereignty. But I don't think that full monetary sovereignty can be based in part, on gold, can be anchored in gold. I don't think it can be anchored, in a commodity. It has to be anchored in the whole monetary system of a fiat sovereign. Going on. That's the key appeal for the global majority. A full ecosystem offering independent, complementary monetary infrastructure that surely can be extended to willing unit partners, in the collective West. The nations of the collective West have their own problems with respect to currency. And here we have to note, that the collective West includes, the nations of the Eurozone. And the nations of the Eurozone have given up their monetary sovereignty to the Troika, that is the European Central Bank, the European Commission, and the IMF. The nations, of the Eurozone, are not financial, monetary sovereigns. They've given up their sovereignty to that particular troika. They cannot generate their own currency. And that's why they are not actually monetary sovereigns, and why they cannot follow they cannot get to the state of an independent, complementary monetary infrastructure. But if you had a group of nations that were all fiat monetary sovereigns, then you could get to the goal of an independent complementary monetary infrastructure. Now to the practical level, as Sabotin explains, the unit ecosystem may be easily scalable because it comes from a fractal architecture supported by simple rules. Here I have to add, of course, so the architecture is based on rules. There must be something about those rules that one is not able to manipulate them in the way the rules-based order, has been able to manipulate the monetary rules of international trade for the West. Going on, new unit nodes can be set up by either sovereign, or private agents, following a detailed rule book in custody of the UN chartered by IRIAS. I mentioned that organization before. The unit organizers employ a distributed ledger, a technology that ensures transparency, precluding capital controls or any exchange rate essentially manipulation. Basically, exchange rates screwing around. This means that connection is available to all open DEX and digital platforms operated by both commercial and central banks around the world. So he doesn't say blockchain here, but this looks like it's the blockchain idea. Okay, if it is, then of course, in order to create currency in a blockchain kind of construct, you have to have some data mining going on in order to actually create the new currency. This too can be a constraint on the availability of currency, bringing the problems of illiquidity to the new system. The end game is that everyone essentially may use the unit for accounting, bookkeeping, pricing, settling, paying, saving, and investing. No wonder the institutional possibilities are quite enticing, Pepe says, as the unit can be used for accounting and settlement for BRICs Plus, payment and pricing for the Eurasian Economic Union, the EAEU, or as a reserve currency for sub-Saharan Africa. And now comes the clincher. The unit has already received backing by the BRICS Business Council and is on the agenda at the crucial ministerial meeting in Russia next month, which will work out the roadmap for the summit next October in Kazan. Kazan, of course, is in Kazakhstan, for those who don't know. This means the unit has all it takes to be on the table as a serious subject discussed by BRICS Plus and eventually to be adopted as early as in 2025. Will Musk and the new development bank be on board? The NDB, is the new development bank of BRICS. As it stands, the priority for the unit conceptualizers, whom I followed for over a year during several detailed meetings in Moscow, is to inform the general public about the new system. Now, the unit team is not interested at all in getting straight into political hot waters or to be cornered by ideologically laden arguments. Direct references to inspiring but sometimes controversial concepts of authors like Zoltan Pozsar may bury the unit concept into pigeonholes, thus limiting its potential impact. What may lie ahead could be extraordinarily exciting, as the unit appeal could extend all the way from Elon Musk to the BRICS' new development bank, NDB, hopefully engaging an array of crucial actors. After a positive evaluation by Finance Minister Anton Siluanov, who remains on the post of the new Russian government, it's not far-fetched to imagine Putin and Xi discussing it face-to-face this week in Beijing. As it stands, the major takeaway is that the unit should be seen as a feasible technical solution for the theoretically unsolvable, a globally recognized payment trade system immune to political pressure. It's the only game in town, Pepe says. There are no others. Yes, but there could be others soon. Anyway, meanwhile, the unit conceptualizes open for constructive criticism and all manners of collaboration. Yet sooner or later, the battle ranks will be lined up, and then it will be a matter of seriously upping the game. Quote, academically sound, technologically innovative, unquote. Vasily Shabikin, co-author of the unit white paper and founder of CFA.Center, a unit's technological partner at Skolkovo Innovation Hub in Moscow, crucially stresses the unit, quote, represents apolitical money and can be the connector between the global south and the west, unquote. He's keen to point out that, quote, the unit can keep all the wheels turning, unlike most of the other concepts that feature dollar killers, etc. We do not want to harm anybody. Our goal is to improve efficiency or currently broken capital and money flows. The unit is rather the, quote, cure for centralized cancer. I sure hope it is. Sabotin, okay, and the unit team, quote, are keen to meet new partners who share our approach and are ready to bring additional value to our project, unquote. If that's the case, they should send us 3 bullet points. They should, quote, send us 3 bullet points on how they can help and improve, okay, the unit, unquote. A bold follow-up step should be, for instance, a virtual conference on the unit featuring leading Russian economist Sergei Glatzev, Yanis Varoufakis, Jeffrey Sachs, and Michael Hudson, okay, among others. Now, those are 4 names to conjure with, assuming, okay, that Glatzev is, but I know Yanis Varoufakis is. I know Yanis has also some knowledge, okay, of MMT, and it can at least bring some of the perspectives of MMT to the table. Michael Hudson, as well, actually has defined himself on occasion, okay, as an MMT economist, or at least as a representative of the MMT economists. He is closer to MMT, okay, than Yanis Varoufakis is. So it is good that a follow-up step involving a virtual conference came on the unit, which had these 4 names on it, is likely to be one which would take into account the insights and perspectives, okay, of MMT, while not being confined to those perspectives. But Jeffrey Sachs, of course, is always to be trusted. He's extremely open-minded and extremely well-intentioned. So a panel study, okay, a panel conference, virtual conference, with these 4 as leading figures, okay, in the virtual conference, is likely to bring up any faults in the unit conception that exists, okay, at this point. The considerations, okay, that I've offered are considerations that stronger economists than I in the MMT field would certainly bring to the table. And I think that with respect to some of the remarks that I've made, similar remarks would probably be made, okay, by Yanis and by Michael Hudson also. By email, Baglatzev, a member of the Russian Academy of Sciences and the Minister of Integration Macroeconomics of the Eurasia Economic Union, the EAEU, summed up the unit's potential. Quote, I have been following the development of UNIT for more than a year and can confirm that UNIT offers a very timely, feasible solution. It is academically sound, technologically innovative, at the same time complementary to the existing banking infrastructure. Launching it under the auspices of a UN institution gives UNIT legitimacy, which the current Bretton Woods framework is clearly lacking. Recent actions by the U.S. administration and loud silence from the IMF clearly indicate the need for change. A decentralized approach to emission of potential global trade currency, whose intrinsic value is anchored in physical gold and BRICs plus currencies, makes UNIT the most promising of several approaches being considered. And there, I think, is the mistaken idea we are dealing with here. Currencies do not have and should not have intrinsic value. They are purely instruments for trade, for business. It shouldn't be about the intrinsic value of any commodity. It should be about the instrumental value of all of the currencies of the world. The currency that should be adopted as the lingua franca for global trade should be a currency that is based on certainly a market basket of the leading currencies of the world, or perhaps a market basket of all of the currencies of the world, so that the value of the currency is anchored in economic activity all over the world, giving no particular nations any advantage with respect to defining the value of the currency. Going on, it balances the political priorities of all participants while helping each sovereign economy develop along its optimal path. The new development bank, the NDB, and BRICS Plus, all of this is a long quote from Glatzieff, shall embrace the concept of unit and help it to become the pinnacle of a new emerging global financial infrastructure, free from the malign political interferences while focused on fair trade and sustainable economic growth. Unquote. A clear, practical example of the possible unit problem-solving concerns of Russia-Iran trade relations. These are two top BRICS members. Russian trade with Iran is unprofitable due to sanctions, and both cannot make payments in US dollars or euros. Russian companies suffer significant losses after switching to payments in national currencies. With each transfer, Russian businesses on average lose as much as 25% due to the discrepancy between the market rate in Iran and the state rate. And here's the key takeaway. BRICS Plus, as well as the global majority, can only be strengthened by developing closer geoeconomic ties. The removal of Western speculative capital shall free up local commodity trading and enable the pooling of investable capital for sustainable development. To unlock such a vast potential, the unit may well be the key. And I might be brought to actually support the unit if the gold component was taken out of it. That is a regressive step. But otherwise, I'm all for the idea of the unit. So that's my take on that, and my analysis of the Pepe Escobar piece, which of course is a very important piece. I probably will come back soon with a deeper analysis that's based on the website that's advancing, okay, the unit as the possible solution to de-dollarization. But that was a very important piece, of course, okay, by Pepe. So now the third of our pieces for tonight. Okay, the third of our pieces for tonight is by Joe Stieglitz. And it's a shorter piece than Pepe's. What it's about is the legacy, okay, of neoliberalism for current elections and for elections in 2024. This was published at portsidegay.org, originally published at Project Syndicate, is where Jamie Galbraith, okay, also publishes his stuff. Only top economists of a progressive bent publish at Project Syndicate. The title is Global Elections in the Shadow, okay, of Neoliberalism. Scandals, culture wars, and threats to democracy dominate the headlines in this super election year, but anti-democratic populist authoritarianism is itself the legacy of a misbegotten economic ideology, says Joe Stieglitz. Joseph Stiglitz, the Nobel Prize winner, okay, in economics. Here are two people at the World Economic Forum, okay, in Davos, somebody from Schwab, and Zheng Peiyan, who I guess is from China. They were meeting at Davos in 2008, and this is a photo from there, so it's old now. New York, around the world, populist nationalism is on the rise, often shepherding to power authoritarian leaders. And yet the neoliberal orthodoxy, government downsizing, tax cuts, deregulation that took hold some 40 years ago in the West was supposed to strengthen democracy, not weaken it. What went wrong? Part of the answer is economic. Neoliberalism simply did not deliver what it promised. In the United States and other advanced economies that embraced it, per capita real inflation-adjusted income growth between 1980 and the COVID-19 pandemic was 40% lower than in the preceding 30 years. Yeah. It's been much lower here in the United States also. I once did a piece on the decades of growth from, of course, from 1945 to 1970, but then the decade of the 1970s, which was the transition to neoliberalism, then the decades of 1980s, the 1990s, okay, in the 2000s from 2001, 2010, and there was a constant slowing of growth. Okay, through these years, I know some of them may have seemed to be good years, like the Reagan years, but compared to the 1945 to 1970 period, they were not good years. And in the years 2001 to 2010, there was a general collapse. And even though there's been a recovery from the recession, okay, of 2008, it was the slowest recovery, okay, in history. We've never reached the income growth levels that we had from 1945 to 1970. Anyway, worse, incomes at the bottom and in the middle largely stagnated, while those at the very top increased. And the deliberate weakening of social protections has produced greater financial and economic insecurity. Rightly worried that climate change jeopardizes their future, young people can see that countries under the sway of neoliberalism have consistently failed to enact strong regulations against pollution or in the U.S. to address the opioid crisis and the epidemic of child diabetes. Sadly, these failures come as no surprise, but neoliberalism was predicated on the belief that unfettered markets are the most efficient means of achieving optimal outcomes. Yet, even in the early days of neoliberalism's ascendancy, economists had already established that unregulated markets are neither efficient nor stable, let alone conducive to generating a socially acceptable distribution of income. And Joe Stieglitz goes on. Neoliberalism's proponents never seem to recognize that expanding the freedom of corporations curtails freedom across the rest of society. The freedom to pollute means worsening health or even death for those with asthma, more extreme weather, and uninhabitable land. There are always trade-offs, of course, but any reasonable society would conclude that the right to live is more important than the spurious right to pollute. Taxation is equally anathema to neoliberalism, which frames it as an affront to individual liberty. One has the right to keep whatever one earns, regardless of how one earns it. But even when they come by their income honestly, advocates of this view fail to recognize that what they earn was made possible by government investment in infrastructure, technology, education, and public health. Rarely do they pause to consider what they would have if they had been born in one of the many countries without the rule of law, of what their lives would look like if the U.S. government had not made the investments that led to the COVID-19 vaccine. Well, Joe Stieglitz, I'm not so sure about that last one. I'm not sure the vaccine has not done more harm than good. But that's a discussion for another day, okay, and for another time. Ironically, those most indebted to government are often the first to forget what government did for them. Where would Elon Musk and Tesla be if not for the near $500 million pipeline they received from President Barack Obama's Department of Energy in 2010? Quote, taxes are what we pay for civilized society, unquote. The Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes famously observed, that hasn't changed. Taxes are what it takes to establish the rule of law or provide any of the other public goods that a 21st century society needs to function. Well, I kind of agree with that, but not maybe in the way Joe Stieglitz means. I think Joe Stieglitz still believes that taxes are what pay for government spending. But we here in this stream, or who've been watching this stream, know that taxes don't pay, okay, for government spending. But what they do is they do drive the value of the currency. Since they enable the value of the currency, they contribute very mightily to the ability of the government to spend for public purpose and the ability of the private sector to trade without a great deal of inflation. Taxes are very important, okay, but for a variety of reasons. But I have to emphasize, not because they fund government spending. Here we go beyond mere trade-offs because everyone, including the rich, is made better off by an adequate supply of such goods, public goods, yes. Coercion in this sense can be emancipatory. There's a broad consensus on the principle that if we're going to have essential goods, we have to pay for them, and that requires taxes. Well, again, in a way, it does require taxes, but not because taxes actually pay for the spending, but they, again, do give value to the currency. Of course, advocates of smaller government would say that many expenditures should be cut, including government managed pensions and publicly provided health care. But again, if most people are forced to endure the insecurity of not having reliable health care or adequate incomes in old age, society has become less free, at a minimum. They lack freedom from the fear of how traumatic their future might be. Even if multi-billionaires' well-being would be crimped somewhat, if each were asked to pay a little more in taxes to fund the child tax credit, consider what a difference it would make in the life of a child who doesn't have enough to eat or whose parents cannot afford a doctor's visit. Consider what it would mean for the whole country's future if fewer of its young people grew up malnourished or sick. All these issues should take center stage in this year's many elections. In the United States, the upcoming presidential election offers a stark choice, not only between chaos and orderly government, but also between economic philosophies and policies. The incumbent, Joe Biden, is committed to using the power of government to enhance the well-being of all citizens, especially those in the bottom 99%, whereas Donald Trump is more interested in maximizing the welfare of the top 1%. Trump, who holds court from a luxury golf resort when he is not in court himself, has become the champion of crony capitalists and authoritarian leaders around the world. So that's how Joe Stieglitz finishes this article. If I may be allowed some further commentary, however, obviously Joe Stieglitz is of the vote blue no matter who persuasion. Okay, there's no way Joe Biden is committed to using the power of government to enhance the well-being of all citizens. He just hasn't acted in that way, and not especially those in the bottom 99%. He's done very little for those in the bottom 99%, while he has maintained, the position of those in the 1%. What has he really contributed to the well-being of the bottom 99%? Some of it has been there, but it has, been actually minuscule. When he had a chance to contribute to the well-being, of the bottom 99%, or at least those at the very bottom of the bottom 99%, when he had the chance uh, to pass the $15 minimum wage, he was too busy respecting the parliamentarian, in the Senate, to support the efforts of Bernie Sanders to get the $15 minimum wage restored, in the bill. And he was too busy respecting the filibuster and the parliamentarian, in the Senate, to pull out all the stops to get that bill passed with a $15 an hour minimum wage in it. All through his presidency, he continuously bowed to shibboleths such as the filibuster and such as consensus, in Washington, and such as respecting certain people, in the Senate, who were his former colleagues, to cave on critical issues and to not pass things that were going to benefit, the 99%. Even the infrastructure bill, which is touted somewhat, gave huge amounts of money to cronies, to crony capitalism, in the process of funding infrastructure and some green initiatives. He compromised severely on those things that did pass, and he failed to bring the pressure of the public to bear on other members, the Democratic Party, on other things that he began to advocate for, but that he then abandoned. And what does his record in foreign policy say? In other words, you can't just consider his domestic record. You also have to look to his foreign policy record. For the first time in 40 years, he subjected us to the risk of nuclear war for the sake of trying to surround Russia with hostile nations, to push further the extension of NATO, to try to create a Ukraine that would help in threatening the integrity of Russia. He tried to create a situation where Ukraine could serve as a platform to create great dissatisfaction in Russia with Putin, so that the instability of that country would be increased. And for the sake of doing that, he subjected us to the risk of nuclear war for the first time in 40 years. And then with Israel, he allowed the Israelis to run wild in Gaza, while constantly supplying them with weapons, creating the risk of a regional war, which would again have led to the risk of nuclear war on yet another front. And then in the foreign policy area, of course, he's increased tensions with China. And in that sphere also brought closer to us the risk of nuclear war. So he's committed to using the power of government to enhance the well-being of all citizens. I mean, Joe Stieglitz, that is a crazy thing to say. You need to talk to your colleague Jeffrey Sachs. He will give you the right perspective on foreign affairs and the risks that Joe Biden has created for all of us in foreign affairs. Of course, then we have Donald Trump. Donald Trump is more interested in maximizing the welfare of the top 1%. He is, there's no doubt, in maximizing his own welfare and that of his family. He's an old-fashioned mafia leader. There's no question about that. But just for that reason, we all have to be committed to rejecting the choice of Biden versus Trump. It is not too late for this election to soundly reject them both and to move on to consider other third-party candidates who may have something to offer. I know it's May. That's already late in the election season, but it's never too late to dump the corruption and take the two bought candidates for the presidency and cast them aside and consider other candidates such as, and I'm going to name them in reverse order, the usual way now, such as Claudia de la Cruz, Cornel West, Jill Stein, and of course, R.F. Kennedy Jr. These should at least be considered because they are not totally bought by big money. Now, you might say, well, Bobby Kennedy is certainly bought by Timothy Mellon and Nicole Shanahan, who've both contributed very big money to his campaign. However, Timothy Mellon has also contributed just as much money to Donald Trump. So he holds no particular brief, for Bobby Kennedy. So I contend that Bobby Kennedy owes him nothing. As for Nicole Shanahan, she is the vice presidential candidate, of Bobby Kennedy. So there's kind of a balance of power there. It would be foolish to consider that Bobby Kennedy is subject to the whims, of Nicole Shanahan, when she's basically his partner in, getting things done. But to move on to the other candidates, certainly Claudia de la Cruz, Cornel West, and Joe Stein are not bought by big money. One doesn't even have to talk about them, in that light. And so they are candidates free of the corruption that besets Joe Biden, and Donald Trump. We have to gather the courage together to dump the corruption and vote for the third party candidates. And if we all equally do that, both Joe Biden and Donald Trump will be defeated and one of the others will win. And if we do that with every congressional candidate, that is House candidate and Senate candidate, that is out there, we would clean house in the House entirely in 2024. And we would get rid of a corrupt third of the U.S. Senate as well. And those moves would make the political system get moving again for the public purpose, for the interests of the people of the United States, rather than the interests of the donors. And if we keep following the dump the corruption rule in 2026 and 2028, Congress would be totally swept clean, of the big money. And the people in Congress would have to rely, on the voters again, entirely for their support. And that's when we will really begin to see big changes in this country that will be good for all of us. So with that, I want to consider your comments. And Kay said goodbye at 10:04. And Jeffrey Denton left the heart, at 10:18. And that's really all that has to be considered at this point. I think everybody else is gone. And so I think I'm going to say goodnight. Thank you all for coming. I see there still are a fair number of folks here. I certainly appreciate that. And I'll see you tomorrow. I should say that the stream tomorrow is also going to be, on international affairs, because there's a lot to discuss there. So we will have a second stream this week, tomorrow night stream, on international affairs, unless something intervenes to prevent that. So thank you for coming today.